I could have carried her by myself forever. January wasn't a kind time for a burial, but we don't get to choose. Old Christmas hid the sun behind a flat gray wall of clouds. January has a way of taking a person's optimism and crushing it beneath its bony hill. I'd take June, when long days kept wayward pessimism at bay for just a few hours more, when blackberry blossoms spilt over old stone fences, while young rabbits got fat and lazy. I'd take summer solstice over old Christmas any day, but we don't get to choose. I stared up at them from the grave, a hole so deep I wondered how I'd ever fill it. Tiny candles threw upward shadows onto the mourners, leaving me unable to see their eyes. My grandfather spoke as I accepted Ben's hand. When somebody begins life on an ill-fated path, there's little that the rest of us can do except watch. This woman never had a chance. She's part of a bloodline that knows hard times. Like my little sister and my little girl, Jane left us not knowing that life can be fair, that people can be just. She left the world as scared as the day she came into it, and for that we remember her. My dad leaned against the fence and stared at the cold, dry ground. His eyes were red from the whiskey. Rachel had her arm around him. My grandfather nodded to Jamie, who led the men back to the house. The procession took its good old time as uncles and cousins paid their respects to my old man. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. It wasn't fair that only the women got to stay. Come on, Ben tugged at my elbow. Aunts and great aunts and cousins stepped aside as Ben and I passed. Nobody cried except for Jane's roommate, Alex. I always liked her, but Jane said she was off limits, said I'd ruin her. She was a little too country for me. Rachel took her by the arm and told her to go with the guys into the house. The faint smell of lilac and lavender scented perfumes cut through the chill. The women chanted old words I barely recognized. On the icy breeze, I caught a whiff of spring even stronger than their perfumes had been. I turned and saw the women pulling sprigs of fern and thistles from their jackets, boughs of red spruce and bright green oak leaves, apple blossoms. Ben said, "Don't look, man, just let it go." Painted trillium, closed gentians, Indian paintbrush, blood red against the white light of old Christmas Eve. Cherry blossoms burst open in a holler of muted pink from the tree just above Jane's grave. But old Christmas was a belief my kin upheld. Just like their Irish ancestors, they believed the Holy Spirit chose the night of the Epiphany to manifest itself on earth in the form of blooming flowers and God knows what else. But I didn't believe that any more than I believed that the sheep chose this night to tell what they saw in the manger the moment Jesus was born. Flowers, I said, walking back to the plot. I know, but you know what tonight is. I don't chew cabbage twice, so just leave it. The amber glow of the wake called to me from the old farmhouse. Inside those walls, my grandfather and uncles and cousins poured whiskey, plated food, and exchanged heart-rending looks. Jamie tuned his fiddle. Going from cold to warm like that wasn't good for an instrument, but he didn't fuss at all. "Don't make me go in there, man." My pap's cattle watched from the field below, braying and breathing huffs of steam. "Let the ladies do their thing. Come on, man. Be strong, okay?" Ben threw his arm over my shoulder, gripping me in an embrace that solidified his anger and sadness. She was like my sister, too. "Easy, Ben." I pushed him off me. "Let me have this, all right?" "I'm tired of it." Ben clenched his teeth. "It ain't fair what that Johnny Bull and his horse are doing. We can't let them get away with this." "It's not a curse, Ben. It's chance. That's just how things are." She drowned. Nobody drowned her. And Durban's downstream. He shook as I talked, getting angrier rather than sadder. I said, "We all have to understand that. I'm tired of this feud with the Lewises and all the hexes and spells. We have to." Rachel turned her back to Ben and me as the women blew out their candles. Their chanting grew louder as their circle tightened a little. Midwinter dusk let a muddy light trickle into the bare forest and fields that ran down to the Blackwater. It was an unpleasant light. Katie, the oldest of all my cousins, handed her tiny fiddle to her sister as the circle tightened. But there was enough light to see Rachel scrawl James' name onto the temporary tombstone with a piece of chalk, cross it out with a hunk of ash, then moisten her finger and write Katie's name in the ash. From the house came the wail of Jamie's newly tuned violin, as loud as I'd ever heard it. Ben pushed me toward the back porch. "Get off me," I said, almost ready to fight. "No, you can't see this shit. You know the deal." There was enough light to see Katie strip off her heavy coat and slip a thin white gown over her shoulders before climbing down into my sister's grave. "You boys get in here now," my grandfather called from the back porch. Champ barked and stepped into the yard. "Get back here, boy. Let's go, Henry. I ain't telling you again." Ben pulled me through the yard. The drone of violin made it too loud to hear anything else. The smell of food pushed through the evening. The promise of warmth made me feel guilty for leaving her in that cold ground. My pap slammed the door behind me, but he wasn't quick enough. I heard it. Despite the barking dog and the chatter, despite the noise Jamie played as a distraction, I heard it. Katie screamed. My cousin's cry was more horrific than the wail of a cougar ruminating over the loss of a cub. Her cry was louder than the roar of a blackwater after a spring thaw. The assembly of men inside the house clapped and sang to drown out Katie's shrill screams, loud enough to speak for the dead. Loud enough to speak for the dead. I'd heard Katie's words, and I knew what they meant. Katie was crying the tears Jane cried on the night she died. Katie was meant to cry for all of us. So,